What's up guys, this is Nick aka Stewie Stag coming at you with a video for pokervip.com, and today we are going to be looking at downswings and how to deal with them. Pretty much, this isn't a topic which is discussed in a huge amount of detail. A lot of the videos you find out there are when people have been running good and therefore they're full of confidence, they're playing good, and that, you know what, I'm going to make a video, I'm going to go out and crush, and if they then go out and lose, they don't upload it anyway. And I'm guilty of this. A lot of poker players are guilty of this. They don't want to begin publishing material where they lose even if they make a decent play. So today I really want to kind of discuss how downswings can affect us mentally, and how we therefore adjust to it. And I'm going to discuss a lot of or some of the common adjustments that people do make, and I'm going to from those say some of the good points of those, some of the bad points, and give some sort of like better adjustments for where a lot of people are making incorrect adjustments. I myself have been running pretty bad recently, which is why I decided to make this video. And I've actually recorded a half-hour session or so. It might be a little bit over that, and I'm going to go through that as well. I'm going to start off in this video, and if I think it's getting too long, I'll go on to another video with it. But I'll try and get it all in this one, and I'm pretty much going to go over some of the adjustments I made in that session to deal with a downswing, because although it would be lovely to, when you're halfway through a downswing, to wave a magic wand and say, you know what, I'm going to finish my downswing, I'm going to start winning again, sometimes you just have those weeks, those months where you can't get it together. It's just your month to get kings in against aces more than aces against kings, set over set, and to run below EV. And it's important that when we have those weeks and months, because everybody have those sessions, and when we do have them, to make sure we lose the least amount possible and make as correct plays as possible. So let's get in there and look at some of the common adjustments people make. Now, the three I've got here, they're not all necessarily bad adjustments, they're natural to make. However, people don't really go about them in the right way, and we're going to look at how we can. So the first one is people playing tighter. Now, generally this comes up if you've been running bad. The first sort of instinct is, you know what, I'm not going to play small suited connectors, I'm not going to play the bottom part of my range, so I'm going to all of a sudden begin play, let's say, instead of a normal style, I don't know, say someone's normal style is 24-21, they're going to say, I'm going to play a 21-18 kind of style, 21-19 sort of style. They're going to get rid of the bottom part of their range, and they're going to play a far tighter style. And this can be quite extreme. I know a few people who have said, you know what, I'm going to tighten up so much, I'm going to play only premium hands, and they'll play sessions where they go from, I wouldn't necessarily say a loose aggressive, more of a tight aggressive type play, to one of the nittier players out there. And it's a mindset you don't really want to be getting into, because although you might think that you're going to get yourself into a lot less tough spots, which is great, you're also going to very much limit the amount of money you can make. And when you get into a pot, you're going to be fairly scared that you can lose a big pot or win a big pot, and you're going to be under a lot more pressure to perform in those pots. So I would say that instead of focusing on playing tighter, I would say focus on playing every spot with the right amount of aggression. If, for example, you have a medium pocket pair in the small blind, don't call. It's not a good place to call. Free bet, because it's a lower variance play. It makes the hand a lot easier to play. And if you have a suited connector in mid position or cutoff, early position open, sometimes you would flat there. If you're playing your A game, sometimes you'd free bet, just because you're more confident. To avoid a tough spot, either fold it, or at the very worst free bet. Don't begin flatting with speculative hands, because it's just going to lead to more tilt. You're going to play less and less aggressive. So that would be my number one tip. If you find yourself in a downswing and you're not sure whether you're playing bad or not, the first adjustment you should make is every single spot, whether it be pre-flop or post-flop, take the correct aggressive play, even if it's something you don't normally do. If you really like to slow play kings pre-flop, for example, I would say that just to reduce the variance for this short amount of time, it's better just to free bet, because at the end of the day, if you can reduce the variance as much as you can in this kind of time, if you're a good player, you're going to come out of it. Another adjustment is for people to play less aggressively. I kind of mentioned this above, and this is where people they don't want to bet free streets because they don't want to lose a big pot, so they begin checking behind on the flop or checking back the turn purely because they're scared that that their opponent's going to check raise them or do something crazy, and all of a sudden they're put in a tough spot. So it could be a case of you have an overpair, the board's fairly wet, and you decide to check and then to call 2 bets, or bet turn and river, and you're missing out on so much value just because you're scared that your opponent has flopped a monster, and that can happen on any board. So I would certainly say that you don't want to begin spewing, but you definitely don't want to become a very passive player. You want to, like I said before, make the correct aggressive play. If you have a draw, bet it. Don't begin checking and let yourself get forced off the hand. So yeah, that'd be my second tip. Continue with the correct amount of aggression, and just don't. I can't really get a good word for it, but don't become a super passive player. If you have aces, use them. If you flopped a straight flush draw, play it aggressively. Don't get into the mindset of, oh, I haven't hit anything recently, I'm not going to hit here. You've got the same chance that you had 4 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and you will do in 2 months' time of making that hand, and you are most likely ahead in terms of equity, and you have a ton of fold equity, so use that. Don't begin to rely on just equity, because it will very rarely be enough. And the final one that I could really think of as a main sort of adjustment people make is to sort of go the other way and begin to overprotect their hands. If they flop a set and it's a slightly wet board, they begin betting huge amounts just so that their opponent can't suck out on them with a flush. And although to an extent you do want to be making maybe bigger bets in these kind of circumstances anyway, you don't really want to scare your opponent off a hand. You're going to miss out on value. And also it forces them to make a correct play. If they're going to call a $1 bet, but they're never calling a $2 bet in a $1 20 pot, but the calling of the $1 bet is going to be an incorrect play. Why would you bet $2 to make them make a correct play, which is to fold? So from these 3 sort of common adjustments, I wouldn't say they're necessarily badly. They're not bad, but people do not. Well, the second one is, but people don't really put them into play as they should do. So to sum up really on this part is you can play a little bit tighter. I mean, get rid of the bottom of your range for sure, but make sure you're playing the range that you are playing with the correct amount of aggressiveness, pre-flop, post-flop. If you are going to protect hands, don't go overly protective with them. And in other words, it's kind of this is the best way I can kind of think to sum it up is to just avoid tough spots. Don't put yourself in this position where you're without the lead in a hand out of position, or you're playing a speculative hand against a good player. Don't check back a flop when you have a hand that can be betting. So all those examples are spots where you then give yourself a horrible decision later on the hand, which when we're running bad, we're probably playing bad, we're not going to make the correct choice as often. So it is important to just make sure you play as correctly as you can. Okay, so like I said, I'm now going to go into a recorded session. This was probably the first session in a week or so where I think I actually ran plus EV. I can't remember exactly what happened in terms of results, but I do remember recording it with the very specific idea to make the correct plays to reduce variance and pretty much make the adjustments that I've mentioned there. So I'm going to get that up and we're going to go through it, and I'm going to go through some of those hands. Okay, so here we have the live session. Apologize if it's a little bit small on the screen, but we're going to go through it. And yeah, like I said, we're going to look at these sort of spots. So first of all, right up there, that ace 10. I probably won't pause it all that often, but we folded in the small blind. It's not a play that I want to be calling with much anyway. The sixes we call because it's such a small bet. But that ace 10 up there we fold. It's not a profitable hand to be playing anyway. The 10 jack up there, I'm going to pause it because I can talk a few of these hands. The 10 jack up here, it's not a hand that we really want to be free betting with. We can play post flop better than this particular player. He doesn't fold too many free bets, so we're just going to create a big pot without a very big hand out of position. So I'd much rather call and then just try and outplay him post flop. And the ace 10, we were out of position, so it's not going to be a very easy hand to play. So straight away you can see the theme of not getting into big pots with weak hands, and making sure we are in positions where we can take a pot down post flop. So with these, you can see how I donk with the 10 jack, just because I know he's going to fold a lot. And this is actually a really good spot where we can see how I'm trying to reduce variance. With this 10 jack, if we free bet, he's going to fold 70% of the time or so. That's his fold to free bet stat. And we're going to make it about $1.50 to win 70 cents. Here we are risking 60 cents to win 85. So we're putting in less money. You know, even if you include our pre-flop call, we're only putting in 80 cents in total to win 66 cents. So it's going to work a similar amount of time without putting as much money in. So it's straight away just a way to, we're trying to win the same amount of money by betting less. The sixes here, it's a really good board for sixes. When he barrels, I think it's fine just to fold. We can call down there, but I think it's just better to let it go. We could also fold the flop. I'm not getting it in pre-flop. We could fold turn, but I think that it's unlikely that he's going to just barrel off air there. One thing I also see is people not stealing enough when they're running bad. I will tend to open a lot of buttons anyway, so I'm not going to stop. It's an area that typically you're going to do fine with anyway. And you know, what tends to happen when you run bad is you find people begin free betting a lot, and you can see here how I was checking his fold to 4-bet stats, and just being mindful of my opponent. This 10-7 down here, I pretty much just raise here to take it down pre-flop. We're also going to have the lead post-flop, so it's going to be just more profitable overall. And this ace-king, I think just getting in here is standard, of course. Stack off against ace-queen, and like I said, we do run okay in this video, so it's not a surprise there. This king-10 actually here, I'm just going to discuss this because I'm not a massive fan of this entire play pre-flop. So we have 10 king suits in the small blind and a fish on the button limps, and we elect to ISO raise, but we are out of position with someone else to call. So this is a hand that I think that against somebody this player here, I haven't got that many hands on him, but I feel like I can remember in the session I'd already won a few pots off this player, and I felt pretty confident that I had a good size of him, and this guy in the big blind wasn't that good either. If this is a spot where I've got a regular behind me, I probably just fold, just because I'm going to be out of position to at least a fish, which I don't mind too much, but I would certainly prefer to be in position. But with the prospect of a reg calling behind, I'm not going to be in a very plus EV spot. So yeah, and you're going to hear me talking a lot more about plus EV in this video than others, just because that's kind of the theme. We're going for a nice little value bet. We're here with the king 10, which is fine. And on the heart turn, I think that we can continue for value. This is a spot where generally if people run bad, they're going to check back the turn, or they're going to check on the turn. They're going to be scared of hearts. But there's really no need to be scared of hearts. There's not that many hearts in his range. If he does call, he's only got an aggression factor of 1. So we're not going to expect him to bluff any rivers. So unless a 10 comes on the river, we can comfortably just check fold, as he's unlikely to be bluffing here really ever. So it makes it very easy. We get the maximum value out of a player, and don't lose any more if he does make the flush, really. So yeah, it's an awful river card, and it's a very easy spot to check fold if he does bet. But like I said, because he's got a weak aggression factor, it's unlikely that he does without hand. And he decided to check behind with the second nut, so we can see straight away how passive he is. Okay, so the queen's on this ace king board, ace king 8 board. I think this is a spot where I wouldn't hate a check behind. I think the fact that our opponent is a decent-ish player, their range might not consist of as many aces as a weaker player, purely because they should be free betting. So this should mean that our c-bet should work a little bit more often. The fact that there's 2 overcards on the board, I wouldn't mind a check and see what villain does on the turn. We could even call turn and then evaluate river. But I think betting here is fine, as we're probably going to be betting here most of the time anyway. We're certainly going to be betting all of our aces, all of our king x hands. So yeah, I think it's fine to c-bet. And when he calls, we can begin to shut down on the turn. I don't really like barreling off in this kind of spot. We're not going to get any value from anything worse. Tens, jacks will probably not call. And when he checks river, I don't think there's any point trying to go for thin value against those types of hands. And he kind of has a hand that isn't awfully played by him, but we probably weren't going to get him to fold that unless we triple barrel. But like I said, we're only going to get really that hand and tens and jacks to fold by the river. And we only lose to king jack, so there's no point trying to take it down there. You saw I folded the jacks on the river. There's no point hero calling there, obviously. C-bet's game off his hand, and he didn't buy it. This king deuce, I'm really hoping I free bet here. I think I did. This player I had a particular read on. I've had a read on him for a while. I've played quite a bit with him, and I feel like he's someone I'm trying to target recently, just because he seems not to be too confident playing against me. So I would quite like to see a free bet here of this king deuce. Calling is out of the question with 2 regulars behind me. One of them, I believe, was squeeze happy, and the other one semped pretty decent as well. So I think it's a free bet or a fold. Seeing as we're running bad, this is where it kind of breached over from. You shouldn't adjust hugely if you are running bad, because you should still take every spot that's plus EV and try and get a hold of it. But so it is a free bet or a fold. We'll see what I do. Be interesting. Hell yeah, there we go. So yeah, like I said, it's just a good spot to take. It's a decent-ish hand to free bet with. We have a king, which blocks some of his big hands, and we have some flush potential. And I think he's folding there quite a lot just because the read I had on him. That jack 8, if I was playing really good, would be an open in the cutoff. It's just towards the bottom of my range, and I've got a regular behind me or a poorish regular who can cause me a bit of upset post flop. So I just decided to avoid that spot. It's something that, like I said, if I'm running good, I'm definitely making that play, but avoid it in this spot. And spots like this with king queen, if the regular had opened, sometimes I'm going to call here because we beat a decent part of his range and we can outplay him post flop. But I think it's easier to play if we free bet. If we get 4-bet, we can comfortably fold playing out of position. We're going to take down some pots, and we've got a strong hand post flop. So okay, so with the 7s here, this player did decide to raise. He's one of my least favorite players to play against. I think when he does raise here, because he is so tight, it's pretty strong. So I think it's best to fold. I think if I was at the top of my game, I could possibly find a spot to re-raise here, but considering he's made it so big, we're gonna have to make it like $9. I don't really want to be bluffing off half my stack, especially if you're running bad. You don't want to put in a massive bet, and calling then just means that we have to call down. There's gonna be some very ugly turn and river cards, so I think folding is fine. I don't like the check on this board here, on this 7-9-4, 2 backdoors. The reason I don't like the check is purely because he is a fairly tight player, and for a tight player, this board doesn't hit him too hard. We can get him to fold. We're going to improve on some equity. So I'm kind of a little bit annoyed that I didn't bet here when I have backdoor equity and 2 overcards, whereas this ace-10 I believe I do c-bet. Really it should almost be the other way around. Although c-betting against the fish up here, who has a fold c-bet of 75, I don't know if you can see that or not, is going to always be fine. But betting turn here, delayed c-bet is fine. And although I say I would like a c-bet, I think making a delayed c-bet is certainly something that can be very good when we're not running too good, because it kind of it plays a little bit easier if we check the flop and then we're up against a fishy nitty kind of player and he checks the flop and the turn. He very rarely has a hand, whereas if he checks the flop he can have anything, because it's not too common of a play to donk, even though I argue it should be. But you know, it's kind of a spot where if you're up against the right type of opponent who's only going to bet if they have a hand on the turn, you can check the flop and know that they're going to check that turn if you don't really have anything, and they're just going to find a check fold quite easily on the turn. It's ace-10. I c-bet just because I know that he's going to fold a lot. Deuce 4, I don't think betting his, we haven't really got enough equity to bet. We have got a gut shot, but freeway, I think we're then going to have to bet river, and you begin trying to bluff someone off a 10 or an ace, and it's not going to work all that often. I elected to fold the 10-9 suited there on the top right hand table. I don't know if you saw it real quick, or I don't really need to rewind it. It was against this guy up here who's I haven't got any stats in, but I know that he's a steamy kind of player, so free betting isn't going to be great out of position. He's going to try and play back at me. And calling, I don't really like calling out of position. Just little things like folding pocket pairs in the small blind is really going to help your help reduce your losing in a downswing, just because it's not gonna, in the short term, you're either going to win a big pot or you're going to lose a lot of small pots. So it just reduces. You're not going to win huge amounts from it in the long run anyway, so it's best just to give it up. King 7 could be a free bet against that player, but we don't want to be over abusing him. This ace-10, I think this is going to be a really good example of, I hope it is, I hope we don't call. Okay, so this ace-10 here, we're up against a fishy kind of player. We have position, but we don't really have that strong of a hand. I would much prefer to see a free bet here. If I was against a reg, I don't think I would ever call here. It would be a free bet or a fold. That's purely because post-flop we want the lead. Against this type of player, I may have believed that I was so far ahead of his range somehow, even though he isn't really playing those kind of stats. But considering he has min bet, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to outplay him post-flop. Maybe I didn't want to lose value there, but I think free betting would be a better option. This puts us in a tougher spot than if we'd free bet, because it just plays a little bit harder. So I would certainly like to see a free bet here. We're on the button. We're going to get a ton of folds. And on this kind of flop, it also plays easier, because if our opponent c-bets here, we're pretty happy. We can call down. But if we free bet, he calls, and on this flop, all of a sudden we're a little bit less happy. But it is going to play slightly easier. We're going to make one bet, and then it's going to be very clear where we are in the hand. Whereas when he checks, we're likely ahead, but we can't be quite as certain where we are. So we do obviously the upside of just calling here, being ahead of this player's range by getting more value post flop. It's gonna be interesting to see. I can't remember what happens here, so I would like to see a value bet. I wouldn't necessarily say. Okay, so that's that there. That ace-10 is a great example of me making a poor decision, probably based on running badish recently. I elected on the river here. I decided this would be the thought process I can see myself having. That by the river, the only I'm only gonna get value from worse ace X's, and they're the only hands that are gonna call, and they won't because blah, blah, blah. The only hands I believe that I would get called against, and would be worse ace X's. However, because of the jack, we would actually chop against those hands, which is why I decided not to value bet. I don't see a 5 calling. I don't see many pocket pairs calling unless they had queens or kings. However, I think in this spot it's just a case of, I think they're c-betting their big aces anyway. So I think here putting in a value bet of $1 and seeing if he calls down with pocket 8s, pocket 9s would be much better. It's certainly a spot where I've missed out on value. And I think it's just a great example of how even when we're conscious of trying to play correctly, that we're going to make mistakes, and something that I really like to see and can then highlight and show you guys that it is, even like I said, even when we're trying our hardest to play everything correctly and not miss out on value, not make a bad call, that we are going to make mistakes, and that is largely due to running badly the past week or so, and missing out on little bits of value like that will affect our win rate over the long run. Because if we miss out on that 20 times, then getting kings against aces, all of a sudden we're down a buy-in, whereas we could have been break even just by winning a ton of small pots. And I'll come on to that a little bit later on as well. This ace deuce hand we opened because we have an ace in the small blind and are probably going to get the big blind to fold. When we flop bottom pair and a backdoor, I think betting is fine. We want to bet on the bigger side just because I think that he's going to have some pocket pairs that are going to call. This is a good turn to continue on. $2 is okay sizing. I think we could go 2, but it does the same kind of job. And on the river, when we miss, it's not really a spot where we can barrel off. And this kind of run out is a really good example of the type of boards that you tend to find yourself having a lot more when you are running bad. And I can remember this hand and remember being quite happy that I had recorded it, because it's a sort of spot where we flop bottom pair, overcard and the backdoor flush draw, so we can certainly bet. We can get him off of a lot of hands. We turn a flush draw, so now even against the king we have 9 flush outs and 3 ace outs, so we still have a ton of equity. And if he has a hand like pocket 6s, pocket 5s, they're going to find a fold far more likely when we double barrel. But when we brick river, it's then a case of, do we continue to try and get him off his pocket pairs, or do we just give up? And I think it's pretty close between the two. I think that if he's called down, the fact that it's a jack means that we can possibly get those hands to fold. So I think betting would probably be better. In the long run, I certainly think betting would be better, just because I think there's more hands we can get to fold. But then again, for him to get to the river without a king or a made flush is going to be pretty low. So I think that a low variance solution to this kind of problem is just to check and hope that he checks behind with some misdraw, 3-5 or something like that. But we'll see what he does do. And see what I do as well. I assume I check, yeah. And a player decides to check behind with the third nut. So it's a spot where we weren't going to get his specific hand to fold. And in the long run, like I said, betting is probably going to be plus EV. But in the short run, we're going to take a very high variance spot and turn it into a... and it's not going to win enough in the short run to help our downswing, help our avoiding tilt. That pot there, we lost $3.50, which is about 17 buy-ins. If we make a bluff, all of a sudden that becomes 40 buy-ins that we lose. It's a pretty big difference. And one that isn't necessary. So I think just giving up on the river is fine, because the other thing to go alongside tough spots, I'm just going to pause it in case this king 10, let's see what happens with this king 10 real quick. If it gets into a tough If we get into a tough spot, we'll... Okay. So the other thing I quickly want to discuss is the fact that when we're running bad, the other reason we don't want to get into tough spots isn't just because we're not always going to make the right decision, but it's also going to affect our tilt level. If we begin making plays that perhaps we shouldn't make, and puts us in a tough spot, and we make the wrong play, in a spot like that where we try and bluff river, say we lose 40 big blinds, at this level it's $8, but it doesn't matter whether you're playing 20-0 or 200-0, it'd still be 40 big blinds. And the tilt factor is a lot higher than if you just check river and see he has a hand that you could have got him to fold, because you only lose a small amount. It's a spot, things like calling with pocket threes in certain spots, or pocket deuces, or opening from under the you're not going to make a lot over the long run, just because you're not going to hit enough flops. You're going to be out of position. You're not going to get enough folds, or you have got no blockers to any big card. So if a big flop comes down, the likelihood is your opponent has got a big hand. He's not going to fold. So in the long run, you're probably not going to make that much money with deuces and trays. And even if you were to make $1 or $2 every 100 hands, or every 1,000 hands, the stress of putting yourself in a tough spot, worrying if someone's made set over set against you, is gonna tilt you, and you're then gonna lose concentration in other pots. So it's those kind of spots which we can avoid. If we can avoid, especially now, we're gonna see fewer bad decisions being made on other tables. Another important thing when we're running bad, just try to get on decent tables. You don't have to be on the best table in the world, but this table at the top left here, for example, I've got a reg and a poor reg to my left. So it's not going to be that profitable. I think I got off this table pretty quickly after this, if I can remember correctly. But we want to be preferably on the table like this top right one. We've got a fish to our left, the same poorish reg who isn't going to cause us a huge amount of trouble here, but then a fishy looking guy and a steamy guy to our right. So this is a really nice table to be on, with considering we're running bad. It'd be a nice table anyway. This Jack Deuce I'd certainly have in my ISO raising range when I was playing my absolute best. I wouldn't be surprised if I see myself do it here, but like I said, when we're running bad, we don't really want to be taking too many tough spots. We can begin to make a big pot there to try and get the fish to fold, but if he doesn't, we end up bluffing off 10, 15, 20 big blinds, maybe more if the wrong flops come down, and then we miss out. We miss our draws on the turn and river. So it's just avoiding a bad spot. This 8-9 we elect to call just because we can outplay the post flop, and we can see how it's now a tough spot because we should be value betting, and we do. But if our opponent raises at any point, we're in a tough spot. And by the river, we then really want to just be check calling, purely because we know that he's going to have some draws, but he's also going to have nutted hands, which for some reason he didn't bet. And that's a really good example of how we should just be folding those hands pre-flop. We save ourselves a little bit, a slightly lower variance play, which is really what we want to be achieving when we're not running particularly good. Things like that king jack off, it's probably at the very bottom of my opening range from mid position, and therefore it's not a spot where I really want to be opening that often, especially when I'm not playing particularly well or running badly. pocket jacks here. I think that when he calls, he's going to be on some draws, some ace-x hands. So I think continuing here is fine to get value from draws and get into fold. And when he folds, that's a really good play. I mean, a lot of people give up on the turn there, just because they assume they have it. Whereas you don't have to bet huge amounts to get him to fold. His floats, his backdoors, which have now got no equity, things like that. And that the jack's hand was a pretty good example of where we should be using the correct amount of aggression in the correct spots. It's Jack 9 suited. I was hoping to get heads up with the fish in the big blind. It's unfortunate that we get squeezed. It's a nice little hand, but obviously folding here is going to be far superior to anything else. And that fold with Jack Queen in the small blinds is a spot which is probably pretty standard anyway, but there are going to be some times where I might play. I might find a free bet or a call just to donk a lot of flops. But like a lot of these spots, they're high variance, and although we can see that they would have rivered second nuts or third nuts rather, and we're possibly going to be we would have got a ton of value. That isn't going to happen all that often. So yeah, in that spot we'd have probably taken down 70 big blinds or so, but in the long run it's not going to be a profitable play. And more importantly, in the short run, we're going to find ourselves in some very tough spots out of position with often a dominated hand. But as you can see already, I haven't really dropped any of my aggression, which is important. Like I said, the second point is for people to begin playing more passively. There have been a few hands where I could have decided just to check on the flop or on the turn. That the jack's hand there, we could decide to check, but often being aggressive in this spot here with 4-7 suited, it's a standard bet. I mean, we've got pair and a flush draw. We want to get folds. I've got backdoor as well. I don't know. And we can continue to barrel, I think, on this queen. And then we can even bet here on this ace as well. So it's a really good run out for us. So perhaps betting there would have been better, but it's not the worst. It's not the worst spot to just check fold. He may be a bit of a station. This ace 10 suited, I think ISO raising, although not ISO raising, we're just building the pot out of position. But we have we crush his range so much that we don't really want to let him see a cheap flop and then miss and have to just kind of play it passively. So it's just another spot where we're going to be in the hand, so we might as well have the lead and aggression in it. This board is fine to c-bet the ace king. For sure, the fish can have some draws, but he can have a lot of hands. So we can just bet. We have a ton of equity, some couple of backdoors, and 2 overcards. With this jack, we have a free bet happy player. He's short stacked, and this is a hand that actually comes back later on as well in a few hands time. I'm intending just to stack off against him. I don't think the reg in mid position is good enough. I don't think there's many players good enough to slow play ace king or aces or kings here, or queens, certainly not queens. So I think it's just a case I'm going to stack off against the guy who's squeezing a lot. It's a big trait of short stackers. And if the reg on my left does have a hand, then it kind of sucks, but I don't think he's going to have it that often, so it's just a plus EV play for sure. It's not one of those spots where I could just call and then really awkward spot post flop. I could fold, but it'd probably be pretty poor to fold there, so it's just taking the correct aggressive play. And we're going to see here with the 10s how it comes back as well, having that aggressive image. And This is probably one of my favourite hands overall in the session, purely because of the mental game behind it. I wouldn't mind double barreling this ace queen. It's a board where a lot of draws can miss. So we make a relatively standard 3-bet size, and I was expecting the guy just to 4-bet and to call off my maybe call off my 5-bet light. So the plan on this occasion worked pretty well. I'm going to stack off with king 10. Yeah, that ace queen I think I could barrel. I think there's some draws that I might get to fold on the turn. We also have equity against his 10 jack kind of hands. It's a good spot for queens to just c-bet. We're going to c-bet a lot of our hands anyway. It's a sort of board. Now this here is a good example of where I've possibly made poor play, where I decide to 3-bet on the flop. We're only scared of an ace or a king, and this is an example of where players can become overprotective of their hands. This player is possibly raising with all of his pocket pairs, some ace highs. 3-4 seems unlikely, but it is possible in some spots. Maybe not against this particular player, but the fact that he's raised would suggest to me that he's weak. He's not raising a 5 here ever. He would have 3-bet kings and aces pre-flop. So for me, I think I don't think he even has that many. He could have, like, there aren't that many kings even in his range. So I think just calling here would be better and let him trying to bluff it off. As like I said, there's only really a handful of scare cards out there. We decided to 3-bet, and I think at this point it's a mistake because he's not stacking off with anything that. Well, he's stacking off range now, or the range we're going to get more money into the pot with now that he has is going to be have less of his like pocket 6s, 7s, 8s, and going to consist more with 5x hands. And the top of his range that we beat, which would be pocket 8s, or maybe pocket 9s, 10s, and jacks. So I think the calling would certainly be much better here. I wish I had, because I'm pretty sure he folds. But then again, we can also be bluffing in this spot as well. So I think calling looks a little bit stronger. Although against these type of players who are kind of that level 2, level 3 thinkers, it's probably better just to call. Spot here with 6s, I'm expecting just to see a fold. Don't really want playing it out of position, regardless of who it's against, just because it's more difficult to play. We've also got that player marked as a fish when I don't think he is a fish. So I hope I don't fall into the trap of calling just because he's a fish. But obviously we do. This is actually a pretty good board for 6s, so I think donking is fine. And again, this is a spot where I like the donk. It's not a particularly good turn card, but I think we could just continue to get him off of his ace-x hands. He has to play it pretty straightforward when we donk, and calls on the flop. He can have, I think when he calls, he's going to be, his range is going to consist of draws, 8x hands, and bigger pocket pairs. So when he then raises turn, it seems very likely that he has a big hand. This ace 10, again, it's not a particularly great play. I think I like to call purely because this player is steamy. We're going to get value off him. We do dominate a large proportion of his range. He's going to be fairly easy to play against post flop. So in position, calling there isn't awful, although I would prefer a 3-bet or a fold. Ace 6, I think I should be ISO raising. I was considering just calling the king queen against the initial raiser in game, but decided to squeeze just because I think that king queen plays a lot better heads up than it does freeway. There's easier to get players off of a hand. The regulars go worry about the fish calling behind, so it just plays a little bit easier. a spot where, yeah, calling with pocket nines here would be not awful, but certainly not very nice. So I much prefer the free bet. I think we can go bigger here on the flop though, although we're not really over protecting our hand. Ace queens towards the top of our raising range on the button. In fact, it's right at the top of our range, so calling the free bet's pretty standard. Flopping top pair, top kicker, pretty nice. However, this is now a spot where it gets pretty ugly for us. We're not really sure where we are in the hand. I think checking his fine pot control, and we don't want to bet and for him to turn up with a king. I think on the river, I might have missed out on a tiny bit of value. Rewind it a little bit, see what the board run exactly was. So yeah, I mean, if it had been a deuce of diamonds, I think betting here might be better because we can represent a missed flush. But the only hands I can really see calling that we have beat would be maybe Queen 10, Ace Jack maybe, but I don't think there's even that many hands, so I think checking down is fine here. We're not going to get many worse hands to call. I think he could do this. He could do this with like a hand with like King 10 to pot control on the turn, hope for us to bluff a queen, bluff some draws. Okay, so it looks like I'm playing one last orbit. So far, I think I would say that I haven't played this session. Looking back, I didn't play particularly well, which is really good when looking back over it, because we can discuss. I can kind of point out hands I have played decently and hands I've played poorly. King Jack is fine to see, but on that board, I wouldn't mind checking either. It's kind of like you can do either. Folding threes there, six-handed I think is definitely fine. Five-handed, maybe opening would be better, but again, it's a pretty tight spot, so you can just avoid those if you're not confident in your 100% confident in your game. So yeah, the fact that I haven't played particularly well is good for a video purpose anyway. But I still think that I did apply a lot of those kind of things that I discussed earlier on, with changing my game slightly, being aggressive in the right spots, and not being passive, trying to take the lead, and when I didn't have the lead, making sure I tried to either take it back at some point in the hand by donking, or not getting into kind of like a passively kind of check call mode, which I think a lot of people do, especially when they're running bad. They'll find a spot and they'll pre-flop, they'll call, they'll flop some kind of piece, they'll check call, the turn they'll check, their opponent will bet again, and they're in a really horrible spot, which could be avoided either by free betting pre-flop or donking or check raising. But because there was no aggressiveness at all in that hand, all of a sudden you get to a point where you can you get yourself into a tough spot, and possibly with the best hand, but you can't really know. Yeah, we're just gonna let the tables run down. I think I decided to open this 5-6 suited purely because it was the last hand of the table, which is really bad play from me. But hey, it might be fun. I think folding against this ace-5 suit is probably fine. We've got no equity, so why put in another big blind? Make a standard size c-bet. We even go smaller here. It's a good turn for us. I think now we can bet really big. But we decide to check. And then talk about an awful hand to play. I think I should have c-bet bigger on the flop. Although c-betting small on the turn there, and then c-betting small on the flop, and then bet big on the turn would probably work quite well. And then we can just rip it on the river, but he was short, so maybe that came into it as well. We have a little bit of backdoor equity here, so I think betting's fine. I also think checking's fine. I don't think he's folding enough for it to be profitable, and it's just a spot where it's going to be difficult to get him to fold, so we may as well have a bigger value range in that particular spot with the Queen 10. But in general, c-betting there is also going to be fine. think c betting this board is fine. We've got overcards and backdoor equity, and I think it's just unlikely someone has a jack. These are the type of boards that for some reason people play them very face up, very honest, even though they shouldn't. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed that video, that little session of me playing probably my B game, maybe even worse. But I was able to take a few spots and talk about how I was affected by the downswing, how I should have reacted. But I certainly feel like I have improved, certainly more recently, in how to deal with downswings, how to change my game around. So in that essence, I think the video was quite instructive. And yeah, remember the 3 tips from the start of the video. And just don't let the downswings hit you too hard. The most important thing that people struggle with is they'll be on a downswing and they'll let it go on and on and on and on because they don't check the game. They fall into traps of playing too passive, tightening their range, and then getting in a really sick spot with aces, which they're relying on themselves to make a really big call on the river, and then getting themselves tilted. So kind of just follow those rules of applying the correct amount of aggression and accept the fact that you are going to lose at some point. If everybody won, if somebody could win all of the time, no one would play them. So then, you know, they wouldn't get any action. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, learned something. And yeah, this has been Nick, aka Stewie Stag for PokerVIP.com. And get out there. If you're on a downswing, good luck to you. Get back on it. Hope that that's the reason why you were watching this video and you didn't just, well, you could watch it for any reason, I suppose. But if you're on a downswing, I hope this was really helpful for you. Hope it can lift you out of a hole. And yeah, get out there and